Hi everyone, this video will outline how to accurately create a reference list according to the 7th edition of APA style. The reference list will always start on the page after the end of the main text of your paper. So wherever your paper ends, move to the next page and write references in bold and centered at the top of the page. The first entry in your reference list will start on the very next line. You do not want extra or blank lines on the page. The entire reference list is double spaced, just like the rest of your paper. You also need to use a hanging indent. If you're not familiar with that term, a hanging indent refers to the indentation of lines after the first line in a paragraph. There's a couple of ways to do this, but I think the easiest way is to start by highlighting all of the text on your page. Then going to line and paragraph spacing, line spacing options. Now in here, under spacing, change line spacing to double. And then under indentation, where it says special, change that to hanging. Now when you are making a reference, the first line will be flush left, and then when you hit the second line of the entry, it will automatically indent until you start a new line by pressing enter. So you can see how that looks with some placeholder text. If we were to start a new reference, again, it's going to go back to being flush left, and then the hanging indent automatically is added. Now the last quick point here is that the reference list will be ordered alphabetically based on the first author's last name. You do not want to rearrange the order of authorship within a work itself. Whomever is listed as the first author is the first author. Now, APA style uses an author date citation system, which allows people to identify a work based on the authors and when the source was published. These two elements are used to make in-text citations, so readers will use those two elements when they are looking for a specific reference. So any outside work that you cite in the text of your paper needs to have a corresponding entry in the reference list. Otherwise, your readers will be unable to look up the work that you are using. Additionally, you should only cite and reference works that you have read yourself. Now, reference list entries in APA style have 4 elements to them, and we just mentioned the first 2, authors and date. The other 2 elements are the title of the work and the source of the work. So taken together, all reference list entries will start by listing out the authors, then the date the work was published, then the name of the work, followed by where you can actually find the work. This is true for all reference list entries, regardless of whether you are referencing a journal article, website, podcast, etc. Now, each of these 4 elements have a variety of permutations for how they can look. The publication manual itself has over 100 examples, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Instead, I will cover the most common references along with the most common variations. When citing journal articles, we need the authors, year the article was published, title of the article, and the journal it was published in, including the volume number, issue number, page numbers, and digital object identifier, or DOI. So let's take a look at an example with one author. We start by writing out the author's surname or last name in full, followed by a comma, and then an initial for the author's first name, followed by a period, then an initial for the author's middle name, followed by a period. And you always want 1 space after each period. And that is all we need for authors. Do not include any degrees, titles, certifications, etc., only their last name and first and middle initials. Next comes the year of publication. This is pretty straightforward. Put the year the article was published in parentheses, with a period after the closing parenthesis. And that's it. For journal articles, we do not need a date or month of publication, just the year. The third element is the title of the article. The title of the article should be written in sentence case, which means that you write out the article title as you would a typical sentence. In other words, only the first word starts with a capital letter. The rest all start with lowercase letters. Once the title is written out, end with a period. If the title has its own ending punctuation mark, though, like a question mark, use that instead of the period. Now, before we move on, there are some common variations for writing article titles. If there are proper nouns, like names, in the title, those should still start with a capital letter. You can write common abbreviations, like ADHD, in all caps as well. Finally, if you have a punctuation mark in the middle of the title, such as a colon or question mark, which we do in this example, the very next word starts with a capital letter. The last element is the source, or where the work can be found. For research articles, that will be a research journal. So next, write out the journal name in italics in title case, which means that every significant or principal word starts with a capital letter. And end the journal name with a comma. Next, write the volume number, also in italics, then directly next to the volume number, without any spaces between, write the issue number enclosed in parentheses with a comma after the closing parenthesis. The issue number is not italicized, however, only the journal title and volume number. Next, list the page numbers of the article with a hyphen between them, but no spaces, and put a period after the last page number. Some journals, mostly online ones, use article numbers instead of page numbers. For those works, you would write article, followed by the article number where the page numbers would normally go. Additionally, if there is no issue number, then leave it out and only use the volume number. The last part is the DOI number. Current guidelines for DOIs say to format them as follows: https://doi.org/DOI number. Additionally, you have the option to hyperlink the DOI. The default underlined blue text is okay, or to leave it plain. If the work is being published online, though, you should leave the links active. Regardless, do not put a period after the DOI number, as that could mess up the link. When we have two authors, put a comma after the period following the middle initial of the first author, then use an ampersand, and then write out the second author. And that's it. The rest of the entry is set up the same way. When you have 3 to 20 authors, you list them all out in the same way as before, separating each author with a comma and putting an ampersand before the final author. Note that there are a few variations in this example, though. First, certain words are capitalized. Now, when you have 21 or more authors, you write out the first 19 authors, use an ellipsis, which you can create by typing 3 periods in a row, then write the last author. Referencing books is fairly similar to journal articles, with the first 2 elements being exactly the same. So start by listing out the author and the year of publication in the same exact format as before. Next comes the title of the book, which you write out in sentence case, but in italics, ending with a period. Last, include the publisher's name. And that's it. Books are pretty easy to reference. Now for a few variations here. If you are citing a particular edition of a book after the title, but before the closing period, in parentheses, write the number and ed period. There is still a period after the closing parenthesis. Some books have editors listed on the front instead of authors. In these cases, write out the editor names the same as with author names, but in that section, end with ed period for one editor or eds period for multiple editors, enclosed in parentheses with the E capitalized. Importantly, there is still a period after the closing parenthesis. This video will outline how to use in-text citations and quotations according to the 7th edition of APA style. So I am using lorem ipsum text or placeholder text for illustrative purposes. The in-text citations are highlighted to make them easier for you to see. When you use information from other sources, you need to separate which pieces of information are your own unique and original ideas from information that comes from other people. We accomplish this by using in-text citations and quotations. Plagiarism, on the other hand, is using information from other sources without giving those sources credit. Now, before we dive into creating in-text citations, note that APA style uses an author date citation system. This allows people to identify a work based on the authors and the date the work was published. These two elements, authors and dates, are what we will use to create in-text citations to give credit to other sources. How you create an in-text citation depends on 2 things. 1, the number of authors that a work has, and 2, whether you are making the citation as an aside from the sentence, called a parenthetical citation, or as part of the sentence itself, called a narrative citation. Parenthetical citations are more common and typically go at the end of a sentence, though you can put them within a sentence as well if it makes more sense. To create a parenthetical citation, you enclose the author and year of publication separated by a comma in parentheses and place it at the end of a sentence. The period or other punctuation mark that ends the sentence should go after the closing parenthesis. So as you can see in this example with one author, at the end of the paraphrased information, you have a starting parenthesis, the author's last name. Again, you do not need first names or middle initials, just the last name, comma, year of publication, closing parenthesis, period. Now, if you have two authors, the process is basically the same as before, except you also add the second author's last name with an ampersand symbol before it. So again, look at the example here. And when a work has two authors like this, you will always cite both authors. Now, if a source has three or more authors, again, the process is pretty similar, except you will write et al. Period after the first author's last name, then followed by the comma and the year of publication. Please note that et al. Is followed by a period, and the comma should come after the period. So it does not matter if you have 3 authors or 23 authors, you will always use the first author's last name followed by et al. And by the way, et al. Means and others. Now what I just showed you here are the 3 major examples of how to use parenthetical citations. You can also cite sources as part of a sentence, which makes sense if you're directly referring to a particular source. And this is when you would use a narrative citation. The process here is very similar, except that only the year goes in parentheses. So as you can see here, you could write something like according to Deal parentheses 2014 to start a sentence. For 2 authors, again, the process is the same, except that you do not use the ampersand symbol. Instead, you write out the word and. And for 3 authors, you still use et al. Followed by a period. Another consideration is if you are citing more than one study at a time. So let's say that you want to cite 3 studies that support a statement you've written. The author date format is the same as before, but for parenthetical citations, you enclose multiple studies in the same set of parentheses. So here, each citation will be separated by a semicolon, and you should order the citations based on how you would in a reference list, which is alphabetically by the first author's last name. The last couple of points here have to do with different sources having the same in-text citation, which would obviously be confusing. So let's say you have 2 studies with 3 or more authors published in the same year. If you were to shorten them to et al., as I'm going to briefly do here, as you'll see, the in-text citations are exactly the same, which is obviously a problem. So to avoid this, you should list out as many authors as you need to differentiate the 2 sources. So for these citations, we're just going to the second author to differentiate them. But if you need to go to the 3rd author or the 4th author and so on, that's okay. When discussing other works, you are usually going to paraphrase relevant information, meaning that you are going to put the information in your own words. So rather than describing another finding or idea using the author's original words, you will phrase it a different way. This is the preferred method of citing other works because it allows you to highlight key pieces of information, connect it with other sources, and make a coherent argument. So whenever possible, you should paraphrase what you are citing. Now, the other way of citing information is with direct quotations. There are only a handful of situations in which you should use quotes, such as if you are using a definition or writing a response to what someone wrote. Otherwise, you should paraphrase the information into your own words. The types of situations that necessitate quotes are rare. Most published research studies do not use any quotes at all. Now, if you do need to use quotes, the process is not very complex. For short quotations that are fewer than 40 words, enclose the quoted text with quotation marks, add a parenthetical citation after the closing quotation mark, and include the page number after the date of publication. So you are taking a standard in-text citation, putting a comma after the year, writing P period, and then the page number the quote came from. You should also try to incorporate the quote into the structure and flow of your sentence.